welcome to Hot Pistons and Indians. Richard's reading Burt Munro. It's the part at the beginning of the story where he buys his first Indian motorbike. So, would you like to?
Is that okay? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
I just thought tonight, just for a few minutes, I'd explain how I got here. I know Tony's quite interested about my journey. He's nodding his head vigorously and saying, yes, I am.
Wake me up when you finish.
I mean, last year I had a huge dose of radiotherapy to try and deal with my cancer. And what it did was, I've actually been to the doctors now, and it's permanently damaged my hearing, sadly.
Wake me up when you finish.
And that's what's happened. It pops and bangs all the time, sadly. There's no way around it. I think I'm going to end up with a hearing aid. So that's one of the things that one of my latest newsworthy events. I've had a series of quite large operations, which have been reasonably successful. I wouldn't say completely successful, reasonably successful, which resulted in me having various portions of my tumours cut away, and I don't know how many injections of chemo I had in my legs, and my lower groin, which was very painful. But as I said to Tony, my good friend, they weren't going to keep me in that hospital, so I got out on the evening and managed to get home.
That's another story.
That is another story. I managed to get home.
He escaped.
And finally, on my journey, and I will update you regularly, I have been to hospital today. I got up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and we got all the way out to the hospital, and were told that the appointment had been cancelled. So we ended up coming all the way back again. I was quite cool about it. I mean, Julie wasn't, I'm afraid.
No, I'm afraid, yeah, I wasn't that cool about it.
She wasn't.
I went a bit red like the stripe on his hat.
So that's where we're at. I think I've spoken to Tony about it, and I think we need to give you little updates of where I'm at, and that's not a bad way to start proceedings. So things aren't bad, things aren't good, we're getting on. All right?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Right, here we go.
Burt Munro. This is, just for some context, this is after the First World War, so 1919.
Good. After a summer and autumn working on the new farm, I got another winter's job, this time at a sawmill in Tehaka in western Southland's Longwood Ranges. Before time came to go back to the cows, I helped go break down 1 million feet of birch as an assistant breaker, then as a fiddler in the pit. Whatever that is, I don't know. Oh, it's going to tell us here. As a fiddler, my workmates and I cut down to ordered size about 8 trolley loads of logs a day. Sawing into hard beech was much tougher than working in the tunnel. I saved my money and then went back to the cows.
Milking cows.
Milking cows. By the time my itchy-footed father had sold the Fort Rose farm and bought another at Aporo near Invercargill, on a trip from this farm to town one day, I saw the Indian motorcycle and knew I had to have one. The next winter I worked at a sawmill at Hell's Gully, East Lime Hills, run by Murukuhu Sawmill Company. I was a shoeman hauling logs from trolley onto a bank. Then I took a contract lifting old tramway for 5 shillings a chain, 22 yards or 20.1 metres. I was able to lift 6 chains of sleepers a day and saved £5 a week. By milking season, I had enough money to buy myself a 1920 Indian Scout. There you go, Tony.
In 1920?
With an acetylene headlamp. I couldn't afford £10 for the model with an electric headlight. Nice bike. I kept my treasured bike in the hay barn. Its main use was to transport to dancers at the weekend. Then Fred Finlayson, who worked on a neighbouring farm, used to come with me as a pillion passenger. When I got home at 2 a.m, I polished the Indian until she looked new again, and then went to bed. It wasn't long before I had my first spill. My Uncle Alf was a motorcyclist too. He and I rode down to Kapuka to visit my grandmother. We were about to leave in the morning. I was sitting impatiently on my Indian while Alf battled to start his King Dick Twin, whatever that is. It sounds a bit... Well, it sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? Yeah.
Motorcycle.
It's an old motorcycle. He was still kicking her about 5 minutes, and I thought I would try to pass the time by trying to ride the Indian while standing in the saddle.
Standing.
It was a stupid thing to do. I controlled her in the gravel up to about 15 miles an hour, then crash. I regained consciousness that night. Bikes then weren't meant to do much more than 30 miles an hour. Their iron pistons would get very hot if you rode much over that. Not long after, 1921 to 22, I had my first motorcycle race. It was the Ority Beach, which for years has been the hub of two-wheel racing sport in Southland, and only lately gone out of use because of the erosion of sand. Burt was talking in the 1960s. It has been used since then. I raced Burt Collett, who had a 7.9 Indian. I've just seen... Is that a King Dick?
Abingdon, 1912 King Dick.
Absolutely, and it looks, kids, it looks like a big single to me, and it looks really.
Well, it's not a big single. It's about
350, 250.
It's about 250cc. Yeah.
Nice little bike.
But it's more like an old bicycle.
Yeah, I was going to say it looks
the
like
way
a bicycle.
the way motorcycles were, because most motorcycles were built from bicycles. They didn't really. Motorcycles weren't built as an independent thing. It was where people would attach engines to bicycle frames. I mean, between 1901 and 1909, all motorcycles were bicycles that had engines fixed on. Round about 1909, Harley Davidson and Indian actually built the first frames that were designed purely to have an engine attached without pedals. Before that, they had pedals. As you can see on that, it has pedals. You can ride it just like a bicycle.
Yeah. What a machine.
Anyway,
thank you,
sorry
Tony.
to interrupt. Continue.
No, thank you. Right, where are we?
We are here. Burt Collett.
I raced Burt Collett, who had a 7.9 Indian, twice the size of my machine. We went right down to the river. Burt had the speed, but mine was lighter. And while he slowed down to go around kelp lying on the beach, I just bounced over the top of it, and I won! Bouncing over the kelp. What a guy.
What a nutcase.
Absolutely crazy, but brilliant.
I mean, this is it. You've got to be slightly round the twist to ride a motorcycle.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, this guy's story is amazing. It's incredible. I mean, I'm not so much like you. I wouldn't read the whole book.
No.
But I search for pieces, and there's a documentary about him on YouTube, which is incredibly fascinating. And by searching for pieces, you pick up lots of bits.
Yeah.
Just like that, when he's waiting for his uncle, and he stood on the seat trying to do a trick that he'd seen done at a circus on an Indian chief.
Yeah.
Because they used to use them to do tricks on. He fell off.
Yeah. And woke up later on that night.
Well, let's be honest. Most of us have done something stupid on a motorcycle.
Oh,
haven't
absolutely.
we? Haven't we, Richard? And fallen off because of it.
I've done some crazy things recently on a motorbike.
But this guy goes well beyond crazy.
He does.
He certainly
He does, Tony.
So go on, continue.
I'm with you. From 1921, I took a job as a carpenter in the Cargill, but still kept on milking the cows to pay my board at Elston-Lee, where the family had returned just before this. I spent a few months working in a bush camp where we cut slabs of manuka to be sold for firewood. We slept in tents on Makuna scrub mattresses. They were a good bunch of workmates, but some were pretty tough. I remember one of them was an Australian Aborigine called Tom Stott, who had been in trouble a few years earlier for shooting up a house in Edendale after he was jilted by a farm girl. Not messing around.
That's not a bad thing to do, really. Yeah.
Riding through the swamp to the camp was my first taste of motocross. It was pretty tough on the bike. I used to maintain her myself, and sometimes I would pull her down after work, grind the valves by kerosene light and have her running again by midnight. Motorcycle fever had me well and truly by then, and I would go anywhere at the drop of a hat just to be riding my Indian. In those days, you raced everyone you met on the road.
No, never.
There are a few hazards you don't meet today, like horses. I took at least one spill on the gravel because of them, and broke my ankle too. In Invercargill, at the time, there was a big roller skating rink called King's Hall, which the locals claimed to be the best in the world, and they claimed to have the world speed skating champion to go with it. He was a fellow called Lyons, and he certainly was far faster than any of the Southland skaters. They asked me to race him on my motorcycle, and I agreed.
Well, of course he did.
I was pacing him round the floor when I smashed into the fence and broke the engine lug on the crankcase. Though I wasn't hurt apart from a few bruises. Should we go on? Tony wants to go on, he's enjoying it.
Well, that's the thing. It's one of them things, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. Most of the stuff that's in that book would bore most people to tears. Yeah?
Would what, sorry, Tony?
Would bore you stupid. You'd fall asleep reading it.
Oh.
But, I mean, when you start talking about he used his motorcycle to take a race with a guy on roller skates.
Yeah.
Well, that sort of shows what kind of people motorcyclists are.
It does.
We're a little bit bonkers.
And full of bravado.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Bravado.
resilience.
No,
Resilience.
Stupidity is a better word, I think.
Yeah.
Resilience. And
Well,
strength
I mean, he always gets up and goes again, doesn't he?
and positivity.
Yeah.
Because yes, you get up and you go again.
Well, let's read another page and see what happens then.
I've had a...
Go on then, carry on. Let's find something else interesting.
Getting round on my motorcycle made me curious to see what the rest of the world was like, and I decided to start off by taking my bike through the North Island, a big adventure in these days. Travelling on the main roads was like cross-country riding today. It was about as rough. The trip as far as Cakeroos, twin mountain ranges in the northeast of the South Island, was uneventful, but in that area I had a nasty fright and felt the actual pain of fear like an iron band on the chest for the first time in my life. I was belting along the road bound for Blenheim and came over a hill, and on the side of the road was a man scything grass. Suddenly, from the other side of the road, a cow leapt out and ran in front of me. I can still now see to one side the man continuing to swing the big scythe, and the other side of the cow rushing across, and me roaring towards a diminishing gap.
I can make it. I can
do it.
It's when you get to that last 6 feet and you think, no,
I'm not going to make it. In a fraction of a second, I was through the gap.
Whoa, cool, man.
But what seemed minutes, I could see in my mind a picture of a tangled motorcycle, cow, human, flesh, great bloodied scythe. The pain in my chest came afterwards and lasted for minutes. By the time I reached Blenheim, I was out of money, or rather didn't have enough for lodging as well as petrol. I parked the Indian by the roadside and lay down in a paddock for the night. I was woken at the dawn by a commotion and found a bull's red eyes measuring me up. He was roaring and pawing the ground, and I rolled under the fence onto the road as quickly. He didn't know I was gone. I got a job carpentering in Blenheim to build up my funds again. The boss offered me another 2 shillings a day to stay when I left. But the road was calling, and I kept on. After a look round Nelson, I sailed on the ferry across to Cook Strait to Wellington and began riding through North Island. New Zealand sounds like an absolutely incredible place, actually. I have to just drop that in there. It just sounds like superb.
It's a very diverse country. It goes from some of the most amazing tropical flora and fauna. Oh God, that's a posh word. Plants. Right through to volcanic areas.
Yeah.
And hot springs, and it really does. You know, you've got Australia, you've got New Zealand, you've got Thailand. They bridge across huge. Oh God, can't think of words. What's the one I'm trying to think of?
It's harder when you're doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is, mate. Right. You're reading a book. That's easy. You just read words.
Right.
So like, God, diverse regions.
Yeah. I remember it in that film.
What film?
The film.
The Lord of the Rings.
If anyone knows and has seen The Lord of the Rings, that is where it was mostly filmed, and it's absolutely superb. I never tire of it. Right.
We'll read a little bit.
The first call was at Fielding to see an old friend, Bondi Doo.
I wish he'd tell us how far he's ridden.
I think he might.
I wish he'd tell us as he went along.
There I saw grass track racing for the first time. Bondi took me to watch an Excelsior Big X. Oh, get us a picture of that, please, Tony.
Right, hang on a second. We'll see.
Douglas, Harley and Indian Machines race on a mile, 1.6 kilometre grass track. Some of the best riders were lapping at more than 70 mile an hour. It's called an Excelsior Big X, Tony. Later, between Napier and Rotorua, I came off the road and hurt my hand. I pressed on through the wilderness. It was near dark when I came across a gang of Maori napping stones to metal, the then dirt road. The nap is a hammer or a chip. They invited me to stay the night, and after I asked how much further it was to Rotorua, I stayed with them, and in the morning they took me to a sulphur spring where I bathed my hand for about half an hour until I could open and close it. They gave me breakfast, and then I was on my way. In Rotorua, they were charging 4 shillings a gallon for petrol, which was a lot of money in those days. When I complained, they explained it was because they had transport the fuel so far from a port. And that's when I'm going to finish reading the book. And Tony has got a picture of an Excelsior Big X for me.
Oh, I'm doing better than that.
I think. Oh, my poor back. What a lovely evening's reading with Tony and Julie tonight.
Well, thank you very much.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed your renditions.
Well,
and Tony's explanations as well.
I defer from the book.
A lot.
I defer from it. I make bits up and add bits on, and I think that makes for a more pleasant evening's reading.
I can do, yeah.
Anyway, guys.
At one point we had 3 viewers. Now it's come down to 2.
Well,
I don't know who's watching us.
3 is absolutely excellent.
It is.
And if you're out there watching us tonight and listening to this preamble, I love you all, and Tony does and Julie does, and we really
I don't love anybody, Dad.
do love people, and we really appreciate your input and your time that you spent with us this evening.
Yeah.
Totally appreciated. So
I will get a bit more information.
you need to.
Yeah, I will.
And I'll see you next week. And we all will. Okay, guys.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for everything.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Alright guys, yeah, we'll catch up with you next week. We'll have me, the headbanger with the funny coloured hat on, and his missus who can't decide what colour to have her hair. Speak to you next week guys. Bye now.